edition of Deals and Deadlines with our agent, our super agent to the stars. That's Hadley
Super Bowl
Engelhardt.
agent.
Super Bowl agent?
Yeah.
I'll go with that. That's fine. More titles. I'm your friend, Matt. We're here to take you through the business of sports. We have a busy show today, including Ian Rapoport, who will join us from New Orleans, side of Super Bowl 59 with all the big goings on, including Myles Garrett trade rumors, where Kirk Cousins is going to land, all the big NFL stuff, which we will get to. But Hadley. We have to start with the biggest story that happened earlier in the week. It happened late night Saturday, which had a lot of people questioning whether the insider, Shams Charania, was hacked.
On my parking spot or no?
That's not secondary.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. The trade of Luka Doncic to the Lakers. So I want the agent community perspective, because I know me as the fan, the talk show host, I was stunned. What was your community saying about the deal?
First of all, this is the first I'm hearing of this. Just so
Just
you know,
happened.
I'm not even aware of this. I, like you, was very stunned. Obviously, I'm not in the inner circles of that. The people that were involved, how long it took, what transpired, not really sure. But for the average fan and the average person in the business, pretty stunning. And obviously, it goes way deep. It's not something that just happened overnight. It's something that's been going on, especially with Dallas.
Right.
Whether they've been having long-term dialogue with the Lakers or other teams, to be determined. We'll find out when the smoke clears. But obviously, there's been some issues going on in Dallas. They've had some decisions to make with regard to Luka, long-term wise. Currently, there's been rumors about some internal issues going on with him and staff members. The big thing that is brought up with regard to this trade that isn't talked about enough is this trade will cost him $100 million.
But don't limit it. $116 million.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
I was rounding.
I know.
And I shouldn't do that.
No, that's not $16 more million.
So that's the biggest thing that people are kind of putting as an afterthought, like he's maxes a different number. That is unbelievable number. So if I'm Luka, I'm really ticked off about this, because this is not a few $100,000 in sports terms. This is $116 million.
Well, let's attack that first. So for those who don't know, Luka was in line to sign the Supermax, which if you're an NBA first team or just any on the all NBA teams, you then qualify for a Supermax. So he was in line with the Mavericks to sign a 5-year deal worth about $345 million.
With your existing team.
With your existing team.
That's the difference maker here.
In this case with the Mavs, but once he gets traded, now he's only eligible for a 4-year deal for 4-year deal worth $229 million. All right, he's not going to be bagging his own groceries, but that's a huge difference in what's going to happen there. So let's talk about the reasons why, again, from the business perspective. We've heard for a few years, and it's obvious, he's not in the best shape. Conditioning has been a problem. Work ethic has been an issue. How much do you think the Mavericks have communicated specifically to Luka, or do you go to the agent because you don't want to go to the player and you keep telling him, hey, how do we get him in better shape? Like, how much communication on that has happened?
I can tell you from personal experience and working with athletes at all different sports, when there are issues, and I use the word issues in quotes, with a player, good general managers and good personnel directors communicate with the agent as well, because we're all in this together. And we want what's best for the player, and what's best for the player in turn means more money for the player, which means more money for the agent. So we've had issues where there's been weight issues or work ethic issues or off the field or court issues or even a social circle issues that they feel will hamper that player's ability to perform at his highest level. And I'm a big proponent of being in the inner conversation to say, hey, listen, I get it. I know how to position it maybe differently than you. It's sort of like a parent, right? Or a coach, when there's something going on and you feel like somebody else giving the message will come across better. And it's the same message. And so I am sure they've had dialogue with Luka and his people with regard to what they expect from him, not just these past few weeks, but these past few years. And listen, Luka is one of the best players. Yes, his ability, what he does at the end of the season and the playoffs haven't been great. And so obviously it's gotten so bad that they were willing to give away their franchise player that they can go around. Now you take the Lakers. How did it benefit the Lakers? Well, it's obviously, it's the franchise. Whether they win or lose, it's still the Lakers. And LeBron's toward the end of his career, obviously. Anthony Davis was, who he is. And they decided, all right, now we have somebody that we can build around for the near future. and we can pay him the Supermax, which isn't terrible now.
Well, for them, they can only offer him the 4 years and 229. So their Supermax is
That's what I meant. Their Supermax is a lot. It's a discounted Supermax.
Well, they get to have a peaceful transition of power.
Correct.
Right, from one superstar to
another. They're the
another.
good guys.
Yes. And they're, as you said, the brand of the Lakers. They get another superstar, another face, which there'll be other pieces that want to play now with Luka, and it's LA. So for them, it's a win. Let me back up to ask you about the Mavs part of this. Do you believe Jason Kidd didn't know? Do you believe that only Nico Harrison, the GM, and Miriam Adelson, who's the new owner, were the only people that knew about this deal? Because the look on Jason Kidd's face at that press conference, either he's a great actor or he was just like the rest of us, shocked at the deal.
If he didn't know about it, shame on Nico and shame on the Mavs. I mean, obviously your coach has to be part of conversations that are going on because you're building a team and you're trying to do things. And again, the last time I looked, the game is still played on the court. And the coach still has to coach this team. So to know who the pieces of the puzzle are is very important. So I think he was shocked maybe it went through, but at some point he had to have some sort of knowledge, you would think. Now, granted, we don't know, and he may be a great actor. But I have to think that as it got closer, especially, to give him a heads up so he wasn't caught off guard.
So here's the other part of this. Mark Cuban came out, who's now not the majority owner. He owns 26% of the Mavs. He joked he would rather divorce his wife than trade Luka. He said he wouldn't have done this, but again, it wasn't his say. He found out like the rest of us. Here's the funniest conspiracy theory I've heard. Tell me what you think of this. Miriam Adelson and the Adelson family own the Sands Casino Group that runs casinos, including the Venetian and others in Las Vegas. Remember the movie Major League, where they were trying to make the team so bad they could move the team from Cleveland to Miami? So hear me out on this.
I hope they don't take clothes off of her and do that.
You're going to love
stuff.
this. So the last couple of times they've been trying to push gambling through the legislature in Dallas and Texas, and it hasn't gone through. It's very old school, like where we don't want gambling. So what the Adelson family wants to do is they want to build Venetian Dallas-Fort Worth. So we trade Luka. We let everybody know, listen, we're going to meet again in 2027 and 2029. We will cut this team down to the point where they're so bad that we can move them to Las Vegas. That's the threat that is being theorized by people, that if the folks in the legislature don't push through the gambling and allow the Adelsons to take their casino conglomerate and move it to Dallas, they will try to up and make the team so bad they move them. Is that wild?
It's wild, and I wouldn't rule it out. Listen, I wouldn't rule anything out. Listen, do I think that's what's going on? I doubt it. But as long as they don't take her clothes off and piece by piece, that's the thing I'm
She's
really
79.
I know exactly. That's what I'm really worried about. But I think there's a method to their madness on what they're trying to do and how they're trying to build this team. And
I can't figure it out.
It's for Dallas. It's a bad situation for their fans. I mean, look, they're giving refunds. Which I've never heard about before.
So they're giving ticket refunds to people who are upset over Luka.
$2,000 for the rest of the season for the average season ticket holder. But again, I find that crazy for Dallas. I have friends and I have colleagues in the business world in Dallas, and they're shocked about this because it was really, it caught everyone off guard. It's sort of like when the Braves moved to Cobb County and nobody knew, right? But the people in the inner circle obviously knew. I just think that LA comes out the winner in this. They look like heroes, and especially if they win now, they really look great. And
to only give up one first-round pick,
it's
and a player. See, here's what Dallas did: they traded the younger, better player to a team where they only got an older about to be 32-year-old and one draft pick. It's hard to rationalize. It
very
really
hard.
Is.
And
all right,
Dallas does not become a place you want to play. And so it's going to be very interesting how this plays out.
Okay, so we'll talk about some of this a little bit later. We'll also get into the Super Bowl, as when this drops on Friday, we'll be a couple of days away from the Super Bowl. So we'll talk about some of the storylines around that. We've got trade stuff in the NFL. With that in mind, Ian Rapoport from the NFL Network will join us from New Orleans to get the latest on Myles Garrett, Kirk Cousins' future, and Super Bowl chatter. He'll join us next. All right, we continue this episode of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley. I'm Matt. At the time of this recording, by the way, on Friday morning, yes, it's Super Bowl week, which means all the goings-on in New Orleans, front and center, which our next guest is privy to all of it. He's from the NFL Network, does a great job as one of their great insiders. Ian Rapoport, kind enough to join us here on the program. Ian, we appreciate the time. And before we get into Super Bowl stuff, I think the week began with a surprise, at least on the outside, and with a bang, that the news that Myles Garrett was requesting a trade from the Browns. So I'll start there with you.
Yeah.
Did you have any inkling of that? And what was the response from people in your business?
I did. So this is something I have known about for I'd say probably 4 or 5 days. Kind of caught wind of it in Mobile. And, it's the kind of thing you want to make sure it's the right time. You want to make sure you sort of, cross all the T's and dot all the I's and everything like that. Sorry, I'm looking for my car as I'm trying to talk to you guys.
Multitasking, I like it.
Yeah, this is most of my life. So you just want to make sure that it's right, and make sure that everyone is sort of on board with what's about to happen. It felt like Monday of Super Bowl week, 10 a.m. right on the dot was the right time. Hit send, and I think everything went crazy. And now it's just going to be interesting because the Browns have come out and said, as you guys know, that they have no plans to trade Myles Garrett. But saying that in a vacuum is one thing. Saying it when you have real and legitimate offers from other teams for one of the best players in football is another thing. At the very least, it's going to put them to a decision, which is interesting.
Yeah, one of the great things that obviously Ian just brought up is, part of what we do on the business side of things is our communication with the media. And Ian is one that I've relied on for many, many years. And, you've got to be smarter to know when you share information and when you do release the information. So it comes out, organically and you get more bang for your buck. Ian, the interesting thing about this is obviously, even though teams will offer fair compensation for someone like Myles Garrett, the one thing we always have to keep in mind is, financially speaking, the hard cap hit that the Browns would take. And even though you would get compensation, you got to be able to massage the cap number, so whatever players are involved, or even draft choices for that matter, you got to be able to replace that player and fit within the cap. And so I think that's going to be the harder thing for the Browns to actually digest and manipulate than the actual trade itself for compensation from another team. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say this. You're right. It is complicated. I would be, based on their cap space, it would be almost impossible for them. Not almost impossible, but challenging to do a deal that involves another player. But, you talk about fair compensation. I don't know what fair compensation for Myles Garrett is. I mean, to me, it's, these players never get traded. They never get traded. I mean, Jalen Ramsey.
That's what Lucas said too, right? Remember that.
Right. But it's basically how high can you count? So whatever Myles Garrett gets traded for, if he gets traded, it's going to be an astronomical amount. I think the other thing is, if you're the Browns and you're doing this, you are rebuilding. You are going into a rebuild, right? I mean, that's what the signal. You trade one of the best players in football for a team that has eyes on the playoffs. You are rebuilding. So you would deal with the bad cap situation now, knowing that 2025 is going to be a challenging year, but better things would be coming thanks to the draft picks. That's how you go about it.
Yeah, most definitely. And one of the other things that coming from the agent perspective, Matt, is that when you recruit a player to come to your franchise, and aside from the money, the sales pitch obviously is, we're here to win now. And we're going to build around you and about these core group of players, and it's a short-term success. And when that takes a U-turn and it's not happening, even though you could say, well, he's made this money and you're stuck here, but I came here on the premise that we're here trying to win. And if the team isn't moving in that direction, that's where the rub becomes. And so that's kind of the area we're in right now with Myles.
So, Ian, let me switch gears with you for a second. Obviously, we watched the whole Kirk Cousins situation play out from beginning to end, and the way it started with the tampering, the way it might end with, on the way out the door, Kirk says, hey, listen, I was banged up after the Saint game, had a shoulder injury, which has people asking, well, was Kirk not honest with us at the time, or did the Falcons not report the way they should have with the injury.
No, he was on the injury report.
He was, right? But he stated, and we played a cut, he said it was a clerical error. He said he was fine. If it was a normal situation where they're practicing, it would have been nothing listed on the injury report, and he said he was fine. He was asked a second time about the injury. He said, I'm 100%. So the question becomes, is there going to be any repercussions for the team, or is this just Kirk trying to build back his value?
Well, I mean, people can say what they want, but officially he was on the injury report. And I think that's what, that's what you sort of learn is like players say a lot of things about injuries. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm going to play. And sometimes it's true. Sometimes it's not. They are not doctors. And they always want to play and always say they're fine. So I think they're good there. I think more interesting is just what they do next. They have some really fascinating options. I would say, they've talked publicly about could we keep him? Hard to imagine, but I guess crazier things have happened. Would be the most expensive backup in NFL history. But to me, the most important thing is they acquired a player who was obviously on the downside, clearly going the wrong way, in a place where it'd be really challenging to replace him, but they've already replaced him. And that, to me, makes the Michael Penix deal one of the most significant draft picks we've seen in quite a while.
Do you think there's any trade market at all for Kirk?
I mean, if he would want to, kind of go about it with the Falcons, he might not. They could eat some salary. They could, do some things to kind of dump him. What they kind of put him through or whatever you would even say, basically signing him and then drafting his replacement immediately. You do wonder if he would say, like, why would I help you guys? Like, why would I work with you guys? Just cut me and let me be free, and we'll see what happens next.
And I agree with Ian on that. I think, by him now saying that, I was injured, I was playing banged up, I think it's twofold. I think, one, he's trying to, rebrand himself that, hey, I played injured and I wasn't the player for the rest of the league to know. And I also think it's a message to the Falcons, basically saying, you put me in this situation, I'm not willing to play ball with you. And they're going to end up, I think, Ian, they're going to end up releasing him. Someone's going to get him for $1 million+ and let the Falcons, bear the brunt of his salary.
Sure.
He'll come in and be the guy where they'll either draft someone or have a young person behind him that they're preparing for the future, and he's there for a specific role to, help that team short term, hopefully help himself out short term, and then at that point in 2026, if he still wants to play, again, the Falcons will still have to bear some of that money as well. But it will create a market for him where he can go ahead and go somewhere else to finish out his career.
Yeah, and I don't even care about, for the Falcons, whatever they have to deal with, people can talk about, it's an overpay and it's a $90 million for 1 year. All true. The only thing that matters is they have a guy for the next 10 years. If Penix is the guy. If he's not, then they're all fired. Doesn't matter. But if they have a guy who can kind of basically take them through for the next 10 years, then that's more important than any, money they'd have to pay right now.
Ian, is there, what actually is, I'm curious, what is the reputation right now around the league of Raheem Morris, the Falcon organization? Because obviously within the city, there's frustration over 7-8 straight years of losing seasons, constant turnover. What is the national perspective of the whole situation? I feel like Raheem Morris has a pretty good reputation. I think he's someone who's a good coach. He was hamstrung by a tough quarterback situation. Kirk, at midway through the season, stopped being able to complete passes, stopped being able to throw more than 20 yards. It's tough, but it does really show you that if you don't have a quarterback, you got a problem. And you got a problem you got to fix. And, I think the Falcons fixed it, but certainly did not help them last year.
Yeah, Ian, let me tangent a little bit. So, obviously, Super Bowl week, and you were one of the lead insiders, obviously, in the know with everything that's going on in the league. What does this week mean for you, other than these stories of Miles and Kirk Cousins coming out? But traditionally speaking, what is that goes behind, the entire week? Can you explain to people about what you're there doing business-wise, networking as well, and do you have some time to let your hair down and enjoy the festivities?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a work trip. I mean, I'll do some, go to some parties and such, but always a work trip. So it's not like I'm, probably end up at the bar until, 4 a.m. It's not my journey, as my wife would say. But it's a work trip. So I'm arriving at the convention center now. I'll be at, our spot on Radio Row for 7 hours. We're doing insiders, from Radio Row. And then it'll be parties, but sort of work themed. Now, the work wise, there's certainly some news, but it's not traditionally a huge news week because most of the coaching stuff is basically wrapped up. You don't have a ton of like player developments. No one's really doing contracts. Nobody's really getting traded. So it's really just like a celebration of the game. And since there's not like any crazy storylines for the game this Sunday, it should be just a good, hopefully, maybe potentially somewhat calm week.
Well, let me ask you about one storyline that has been out there, and I know Roger Goodell talked about it when he addressed the media earlier in the week. The idea of the 18th game being added. Do we wait till the new CBA? Do you think that was just something he says at the time? How do you think that plays out?
I think it really depends on how quickly the union wants to move on it. I would say, is it possible just within the next 3 years? Like, yeah, I think it's possible. And then at that point, it's like, does the NFL redo the whole calendar? Like, we've all sort of become accustomed to the rhythms of the NFL calendar, and, might it change? I think maybe, but, would theoretically be financially worth it to the players, certainly financially worth it to the teams. And then because the game has gotten healthier, fewer concussions, all that, it's much more palatable. It does certainly feel like it is coming.
And remember that this has to be negotiated. It's not an automatic, unilateral decision. And I've said, Ian, time and time again, there's an archaic funding rule that, for teams to fully guarantee contracts, anything beyond the first year, the owner has to write a check for the entire amount. And that was done back in the heyday when teams weren't as solvent and they were concerned about it. I've said this time and time again that I hope the union takes the stance that if we're going to add an 18th game and create more money for players, but more importantly for the league and for the owners, to try their hardest to get rid of the funding rule. And that way teams and the non-rich teams, if you want to call it, could guarantee more monies and not have to worry about the funding rule.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if that's the direction they go. I mean, that has not been a fight they've really been willing to take on the last couple of years, but we're probably about to find out. So,
Ian, one more for you. You're in New Orleans. That's the one job left open. It seems like all the momentum is facing Kellen Moore as the next head coach of the Saints. Is there any potential hurdles, or does that feel like it gets done after the Super Bowl?
Feels like it gets done after the Super Bowl. Everyone's sort of, no one said like, oh, it's not true. It's like more like, let's wait a week. I think New Orleans is adhering to the letter of the law. Basically saying like, we're not going to finalize a contract, so we're just not. It does feel like it's going to be Kellen. I think it's going to be someone who is, a really good hire. Maybe not the most vocal leader of all time, but really cerebral, really smart. Has been a player, so he's been there. I think in the end it'll be something that'll make the Saints pretty happy. Now, it's not exactly a easy situation. There's some rebuild that's going to have to go on, but that seems like it's the direction it's going for sure.
Well, A, we hope you found the car. B, we hope it's a great week in New Orleans.
I'm in the car.
Okay, good. Listen, it's the little wins, Ian, that we love in life. Appreciate you taking some time in a very busy week to spend with us. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, Ian. Thanks, man.
Good talking to you.
There's Ian Rapoport, NFL Network. Make sure you check out Insiders and all the great work happening from New Orleans. All right, when we continue, we'll talk more about the Super Bowl. How much does it cost to get in? I think the number's going to surprise you. Plus, we'll chatter about the 18th game in the NFL and the international footprint that the league wants. We'll do it next. All right, we continue this episode of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley on Matt. I'll remind you guys a couple of ways you can enjoy this program. You can watch it weekly on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. It drops on Fridays, just like it drops wherever you get your favorite podcast. Search Deals and Deadlines. It'll be waiting for you in your feed. All right, Mr. Hadley, as I said at the time of recording, we're getting ready for Super Bowl 59. Now, a guy with your means, this isn't a big deal. But for the rest of us, getting into this game, quite pricey. I was looking at the secondary market. This was from this morning. Updated prices to get in. TickPick, $4,070. StubHub, get in prices $43.57. SeatGeek, $44.73. Game Time, $44.20. NFL on Location, $4,950. That's get in prices upstairs just to get in the door. It's a bucket list thing. You want to get there. But we have priced the average everyday fan out of this thing, and we did it years ago, and I don't know how that's ever coming back.
First of all, the everyday fan didn't really go to the Super Bowl to begin with, even when these prices didn't get that
guys
way.
Like this, right?
But, it's funny. We just talked about this internal in the office. Someone approached us with some tickets to see if we knew anybody that wanted any. First of all, prices are coming down, believe it or not. The fact that it's a three-peat sounds great, but the reality is people aren't excited about.
Well, they saw this game 2 years ago, yeah.
Correct. So the bigger issue when we've talked to people about the ticket prices wasn't as much the ticket prices. It was the airfare and the ability to get a hotel room. And so that's really where the price gouging is going through the roof. So I think ticket prices have gone up, but I don't think they're crazy. And I think if the longer you wait and closer, the better off you're actually going to be.
It's funny. I imagine if it had been Buffalo, for instance. You know the demand of the Bills fan who hasn't been here in so long.
If it had been Buffalo and Detroit, ticket prices would have been through the roof because of the teams and the newness of them being there. But I think that, first of all, New Orleans, to me, is one of the greatest places to have a Super Bowl. Right?
They host it well.
They host it well. Everything's walkable. There's a great nightlife. But more importantly, there's a tremendous amount of hotels and restaurants. And those are two big issues when you go to certain markets. And again, everything's walkable. The problem is finding a hotel, and there's minimum night stay, and trying to get into any restaurants. It's impossible. So that becomes the bigger issue of going to the Super Bowl aside from the actual ticket price.
Here's the thing. I agree with you on the ticket part of it. The Kansas City fan, you get spoiled. You've been to big games, right? Philly's there 2 years ago. So the ticket demand is dropping. I think the TV ratings, Kansas City is the biggest TV draw because of Mahomes, the Taylor Swift effect, the Chiefs brand, all of it. So it's sort of the Golden State Warriors kind of thing that maybe the ticket sales suffer, but I think the TV numbers, they're always great for the Super Bowl. They will not suffer at all.
No, I think they'll be fine. And, I think it's kind of ironic that, you wonder if all these principles are working together. We have as a halftime show, Kendrick Lamar.
Right.
A week ago, less than a week ago, he walks away with all these Grammys. Was that part of this whole conspiracy theory? Because again, it's about selling tickets. It's about the networks. It's about, all these factors. So you wonder if all those things come into play. But I think the numbers are going to be what they are. I think it's going to be a very good game. It's exciting to see the three-peat. Something that we may talk about, but it's interesting. I don't know if the audience knows about the term three-peat. Is Pat Riley owns that term. He did it back in the day with the Lakers.
Copyrighted
and he has agreed to terms with the NFL. And they've used the word allow. Obviously, he didn't allow it. He got paid. Yeah. He's going to get a royalty. He's going to get a copyright fee. So he is loaning the name for the purpose of if the Chiefs win, whoever wants to use the term three-peat has to pay him a fee. So good for him, by the way. Smart thinking that he did it.
It's been used a couple of times before, and it's paid him off. Couple of million here and a million there, and it's really well played.
Because he needs it, Pat Riley.
Well, listen, everybody likes more.
Exactly.
Right? All right, so we talked to Ian Rapoport about the 18th game that Roger Goodell mentioned when he was doing his address to the media at the beginning of Super Bowl week. Ian said, wouldn't shock him if it happened in the next 3 years, but it could go all the way till 2030. That's when the CBA, the current deal, expires. I'd be stunned because whenever there's money to make, we have a hard time waiting, right? It's like the college football playoff. They had an agreement in place till 2028. Well, that thing got done very quickly. Like you said, if the players see the value and there's another game, there's more money, the TV deal gets bigger, like it's a win for everybody. How do we wait?
Yeah, I don't think it waits. Yeah. I think it's at least the league is going to approach the union and try to get it done sooner than later. It's again is what are they going to give up in return? What are the important buttons for the union? I've expressed certain things that I think are important, but the union itself, we're under new leadership in the last 18 months, so they may have a different path that they think is important. But I agree with you. I don't think it waits. Interesting that Roger Goodell brought up about he thinks we're going to have an international team in the near future. I still don't agree with that. I think it's going to be harder than you think to do.
You're right. They don't care.
Correct.
Hadley, you're so right. We've all logistically, it's awful. Taxes, they don't care.
But the players are going to have to agree to it, and there's going to be
they're going to be given a little.
Correct. And so I think that's going to be part of this negotiations. Yeah. And so I think that's where the union has certain things that are important to them. And again, we're under new leadership, and so it's going to be interesting to see, knowing that on the horizon. In the short term is the 18th game. Long term is international team. And then other things.
In the meantime, we're talking about so the latest number they talked about was 8 international games in 2025 as they continue their globalization of the league. We're going to get to a point that it'll be, before we get to a team, we're going to have 16, 17 weeks or 18 as it be. We're going to have an international game a week. And why? Well, the globalization is one thing. If they can get a game in that 9 a.m. window every week, it gives them 4 days.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I was going to say that at the end of the day, yes, the global market and this game and whatnot, I think that's trivial. Right. I think it's more important that when you have a 9 a.m. slot, so now you're on from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., what an amazing thing to build your brand and continue to grow it. So I think that is more the value to the international games than actually playing in Europe and the money they make in the stadium and the fans and the gear they sell. I think at the end of the day, it's about the networks being on TV for an additional 3+ hours every day, every Sunday.
Let me ask you one final thing about the Super Bowl. So you mentioned New Orleans. New Orleans is a great host city for it. Everything's walking distance. If you're in that area, it's great. I love Atlanta. Spread out, it's different. It's not bad. We host things well. It's just different. Cities like New Orleans, cities like and I say Miami, but Fort Lauderdale is where, Miami Gardens and everything would be. There are certain cities that I think are just built to host these events. And it becomes a carrot when you get a new stadium, and it becomes a thing that they like to move it around, and Jerry World gets it once, and we'll give it to Minneapolis when they build a stadium. How does the league view the host Super Bowl city? Do they care about, like I just talked about, the logistics for the fans and the media? Is it just build the stadium, it's more money? How do they view who gets the Super Bowl?
I think it's a combination, because obviously Minnesota in the dead of winter isn't a place that you would think you'd host a Super Bowl, but they built this new beautiful stadium, and contingent upon them building it, and they've got a beautiful downtown. There's a lot of happening there, but the weather was awful. But it's a carrot, right? If you build, they will come. So they go ahead and they will, bring a Super Bowl there. But I do think there are certain cities, LA, Arizona, New Orleans, Florida, Tampa, and Miami specifically, that are great cities because of either A, weather, or B, the nightlife and the hotel access. So I think that, the league is good about rewarding teams that do positive stuff. I also think Vegas is now going to be the, part of that cycle of franchises that get it on a regular basis. But I think they think of all these things. But at the end of the day, I think they think less about what do we think,
right?
What do the fans think? What do the fans care? Again, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. At the end of the day, they are making business decisions that affect their pockets, and the owners support it. And again, it trickles down to some point to the players.
As long as we don't have to go to Jacksonville again. No offense to Jacksonville. A little much for that
and
city.
Stay on a boat.
Correct. I didn't want to say it. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I will remind you guys, if you're just finding us, thank you. The way you can guarantee you get this each and every week is by subscribing right now. Hit that subscribe button. It'll be waiting for you in your feed each and every Friday morning when it drops, and also available to you on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. Thank you to Amanda Schwartz, our outgoing producer. She didn't care about us. She's leaving. And thanks to you guys for spending your time with us. We'll talk to you next week on Deals and Deadlines.